Here's a short story about Claude and Catherine, who entered a farmer's market looking for something to fill their baskets and discovered that the true harvest was already waiting in the mind. Harvest and Extend, the farmer's market of miracles. Claude and Catherine arrived early, just as the morning sun spilled gold across the village square. Canvas awnings fluttered above tables, overflowing with peaches, tomatoes, herbs, flowers, honey, and warm loaves of bread. At the center of the market stood an enormous horn of plenty, spilling apples, grapes, grain, and colorful vegetables onto a long wooden table. A painted sign above it read, "The Farmer's Market of Miracles." Claude picked up an empty basket. "Better fill this while there's plenty," he said. Catherine laughed. "Plenty seems to be doing fine without our help." At the first stall, an old baker handed them a warm loaf. "No price?" Claude asked. The baker shook his head. "Manna from heaven." Claude raised an eyebrow. "It looks like bread." "It is bread," the baker said, "but what nourishes you is the wisdom you receive with it." He broke off a piece and handed it to Claude. "Take only today's bread. Yesterday's guidance has gone stale, and tomorrow's has not been baked." Catherine smiled. Claude tucked the loaf into his basket. At the next stall stood a glass pitcher of sparkling water. A sign read, "Drink and thirst no more." Claude poured himself a cup. "What kind of water is this?" The woman behind the table smiled. "The kind that reminds you to stop searching." Claude drank. It tasted like ordinary water, yet something in him became quiet. They continued through the market until they heard two vendors arguing. "You promised me 12 baskets." "I said 10, Claude whispered. "That man is dishonest." Catherine said, "Did you hear him say that?" "Well, no." "So perhaps you are hearing what you imagine he means." Claude stopped. He had done that all his life. Someone frowned, and he imagined rejection. Someone grew quiet, and he imagined disappointment. Someone disagreed, and he imagined guilt. He had spent years walking on imaginary eggshells. At another stall, tiny bottles were arranged beneath a sign, "Diluted poison." The labels read, "Approval, people-pleasing, fear of disappointment, need to be understood." Claude laughed nervously. "I've tasted all of those." "And survived," Catherine said. The vendor pointed to a barrel beside him. "Pure innocence, free refills." Claude looked inside. It was empty. "There's nothing there." "Exactly," said the vendor. "Nothing has to be added to innocence." Farther down the market, a farmer was scattering seeds into people's hands. "What are these?" Catherine asked. "Ideas of love," he replied. "How much?" "Give them away." Claude looked confused. "That's the price?" "That's the harvest." The farmer placed several seeds in Claude's palm. "Thoughts of love multiply through extension. Keep them for yourself, and they seem small. Give them away and discover they were never scarce." Claude looked toward the giant cornucopia overflowing in the center of the market. For the first time, he understood its strange abundance. Nothing there was being hoarded. Everything was moving. Fruit from farmer to neighbor. Bread from baker to child. Flowers from stranger to stranger. Smiles passing between people who might never meet again. Giving did not diminish the market. Giving was the market. Then Claude noticed another stall. There were no vegetables, no bread, no jars. Only a chair. Above it hung a sign, "The Holy Instant." "What happens here?" he asked. "You sit," said Catherine. "That's all?" "That's enough." Claude sat. Immediately his mind began offering merchandise of its own. Opinions, conclusions, old conversations, regrets, future plans. What Catherine should have said. What somebody might think. What tomorrow might bring. Thought after thought shouted like merchants competing for his attention. Claude opened his eyes. "My mind is full of imposters." Catherine sat beside him. "Then perhaps you don't have to buy what they're selling." Claude closed his eyes again. The thoughts continued, but something had changed. He no longer needed to follow them. "I am not these thoughts," he whispered. The market sounds softened. For one quiet instant, there seemed to be no past to repair and no future to secure, only awareness. Whole. Still, unthreatened. Claude opened his eyes. "Was that eternity?" Catherine smiled. "Maybe the closest approximation we can recognize while we still believe in time." They returned to the cornucopia. Claude looked into his basket, fruit, seeds. Yet suddenly the basket seemed beside the point. He took out the loaf and shared it with a family nearby. Catherine handed her flowers to an elderly woman. Claude scattered his seeds among the children. Soon his basket was empty, and strangely, he felt fuller than when they arrived. Above the market gate, a final sign caught the morning light. Harvest and extend. Claude took Catherine's hand. So the miracle wasn't getting more? No, she said. It was discovering there was never a shortage. Together they walked home with empty baskets and peaceful minds, having learned that heaven's abundance cannot be stored, because what is real is recognized by giving it away. May we sing, rest, and dance our way home together.